Just got out of the cinema from seeing Spider-Man No Way Home, and it was awesome! Now, if you've known me, you know that I've been having problems with the MCU as of late. Namely, it's beginning to lose that original spark. It's beginning to become like The Simpsons or Ice Age or any other franchises that are still good but begin to lose that original spark over time, like the laws of entropy dictate. Although, when it comes to franchises, I must say, if you're going to keep making good stories, by all means, keep going. I mean, this was clearly one of them. But if they keep making films like the one I just saw, yeah, keep going. Keep going. But if you're going to keep giving out then another film that's akin to like Eternals or Shanghai or anything more like that, it's going to start becoming boring. Because the MCU has pretty much given us quality superhero entertainment and pretty much nailed it down to a science at this point. They know what the people love, and they've made one of the biggest epics since, like, Return of the King with Endgame. But you want to know why the movie I just saw works so well? It's mainly because it doesn't just work as an MCU movie. It also works as a Spider-Man movie, which, oddly enough, was mainly the reason why so many people were complaining about the previous Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. They're not bad by any means, but people could really feel that, what's the word? Many people complained that the Tom Holland version of Spider-Man felt very commercialized. It felt more like they were trying to appeal to the demographic that the MCU established rather than a Spider-Man movie. And the more I think about it, the more that rule could apply to the other MCU movies, which is why the MCU's beginning to lose its original spark. The reason people bought into the MCU in the first place was because the superhero movies, the origin stories, sequels, so on and so forth, stood out individually. And then when the big crossovers came together, people knew these characters, and that made the inevitable crossover encounters all the more epic. Now, failing to latch onto making characters grow first and working on individual movies was the very mistake that the Dark Universe made. You know, that failed multiple universe attempt with Tom Cruise's The Mummy. That went terribly wrong. You don't want to end up like Tom Cruise's The Mummy, where you focus so much on teasing more movies and little secrets and nods and all these other things that you overlook making a good quality film as it is. Do you know what I mean? But thank God this Spider-Man movie does not make the same mistakes as something like Tom Cruise's The Mummy or the recent Marvel's Eternals movie. Yes, even the MCU that has mastered this multiple universe trend and started it to begin with, even they are mortal and make mistakes from time to time. But hey, as Master Chief in Halo Infinite said, we all make mistakes. It's what makes us human. Speaking of mistakes, how does Spider-Man's No Way Home go? I've got to be honest, I didn't really see all of Far From Home, but I guess I know enough about it to know what happens. I mean, the third movie kind of spoils what happens. After Tom Holland's Spider-Man had a ferocious battle against Mysterio with the help of Nick Fury and the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Mysterio exposed Spider-Man as Peter Parker. And because of this, J. Jonah Jameson, played once again by the ever so brilliant and unrecastable J.K. Simmons, he is taking advantage of this and making Spider-Man look like even more of a jerk. Because journalists, most of them can never be trusted. That applies to fiction and in real life. And so, the word spreads out, Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and conspiracies go around. This causes problems for not just Peter Parker, but also his Aunt May, the Jon Favreau agent guy, MJ, played once again by Zendaya, and the best friend buddy man. And already there's some mentions and cameos with like the Daredevil guy. Okay, focus on the story, focus on the story. To add salt to the wound, Peter, MJ, and best buddy boy man are all trying to make amends for that by trying to enter MIT college, only to fail. Hey, I've been trying to sign up for some jobs recently and I got denied a lot of times. I can relate to this version of Peter Parker in that regards. So, with seemingly nothing else to do, Peter Parker is so desperate to reverse what happened, he decides to do it quite literally. So he goes over to Doctor Strange's place and asks him to cause a spell that will make everyone forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. However, as he makes a deal with Doctor Strange to cast the spell, Peter Parker starts having second thoughts when he realizes that if everyone forgets that he's Spider-Man, that includes his loved ones, his Aunt May, MJ, and his best friend. Peter should have really thought this through before committing the spell, as Doctor Strange tries to adjust to that, but the demands become a bit too much and Doctor Strange's spell goes a bit array. So, well, a bit. It almost went much worse, but Doctor Strange managed to prevent an even more catastrophic. Doctor Strange prevents a catastrophic. Come on! Doctor Strange prevents a catastrophic event from happening, but some leaks of that catastrophe are still leaking through. Long story short, he's unintentionally opened up the multiverse. The conditions of this multiverse spell thingamabobber is that everyone who knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man is now coming over to Tom Holland's universe. So, multiple universes, the guarantee of villains coming along, put the pieces together, everybody get your inner fangirl! Or fanboy. Because not too long after Peter's trying to fix his code stuff once again, he's attacked by villains. More specifically, why can't I speak properly today? He gets attacked by Dr. Otto Octavius from the Tobey Maguire movies. Hello, Peter. Why is that so cool? They fight only for Otto to quickly realize that this Peter Parker is not the Peter Parker he recognizes. And of course, Otto is not the only villain to attack the Tom Holland Spider-Man. Why did I make an awkwardly long pause trying to say that? We also have the Green Goblin from Tobey Maguire's universe. We have the Green Lizard Man and Electro from the Andrew Garfield universe. Oh yeah, and Sandman from Tobey Maguire's universe is thrown in there too. So, Doctor Strange teams up with Peter Parker, or Peter Parker teams up with Doctor Strange, to capture all these let loose villains and send them back to their respective multiverse universes. But later, Peter feels pangs of sympathy towards these villains and thinks he can help them. Doctor Strange refuses, but Peter manages to trap Doctor Strange in the mirror dimension and delay the return and the reversal of the spell and whatchamabobber to try to help the villains out. At first, he seems to be making some genuine progress, only for things once again to go very wrong. You could say Peter is walking on some very thin ice. And it's here we see the true strength of this movie. A strength that was actually applied especially when the ice shows up. The strength that this movie portrays is the exact same strength that we began to saw in much of the Tobey Maguire movies. As well as, I would even argue, the second Andrew Garfield movie. Consequences. Actions that have consequences add extra weight to the plot and growth for the character. Genuine impact raises the stakes and forces our characters to grow by entering this crisis phase, having to face the impact of their choices and take up, dare I say it, responsibility. Yes, truly, this must be the first, I keep mixing up the names, Tom Holland Spider-Man movie to truly implement the now famous quote, "With great power comes great responsibility." So from henceforth, I'm going into some major spoiler territory. Everything else was minor compared to this. The villains are let loose and Aunt May dies. And it's a very sad scene. That I did not see coming, but should have. Yeah, Tom Holland isn't playing around anymore. That was one of the major complaints people had with the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. In fact, a friend of mine from India showed me this video essay showcasing that the Tom Holland Spider-Man, as great as he's portrayed, doesn't feel like he's genuinely growing in many regards. People complained that the reason for goodness sake, I keep mixing up the names, that the Tom Holland movies were of lesser quality compared to the other Spider-Man movies was because the Tom Holland Spider-Man never had to face up responsibilities for actions that he'd done. Like, buildings would blow up. We'll pass it off. Whereas in, like, Spider-Man 2, a building blowing up was a really big deal. And they even emphasized in Spider-Man 2 that every decision that the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man made had major consequences in New York City around him. Like, whether the crime rate would go up or down, how he would manage his double life of Peter Parker and Spider-Man. But all this was finally coming into play with this movie. And even Doctor Strange points this out to Peter Parker. You see, Peter, this is what happens when you make a deal with the devil. Yeah, seeing how the Spider-Man movies are obviously inspired by the comic book sources, I do remember there was one story that I heard of where Spider-Man Peter Parker makes a deal with the devil to make sure everyone forgets that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, that Spider-Man is Peter Parker. And this has major consequences. And it would seem that Doctor Strange is the stand-in for the devil. And given the questionality of his magic, I think that's quite thematically appropriate, if you ask me. It's probably going to make even more sense with the upcoming Doctor Strange in the Multiverse movie, which hints at a much more evil version of Doctor Strange. Anyway, going back to losing Aunt May. Yeah, losing Aunt May sucks. But MJ and the best buddy boy do some tampering, and they managed to find the other Spider-Man. Yeah, we knew where they were coming. We knew. But it was still so cool to see them on screen together. Yup, that's right. I mean, the hints were already there. The previous villains were played by the same actors who played the previous villains in their respective movies. You got Alfred Molina portraying this maniacal yet sympathetic and intelligent Dr. Otto Octavius. You got Willem Dafoe back as the half tragically sympathetic and half overacting maniacal Green Goblin, aka Norman Osborn. I think Dafoe in particular is having the time of his life as this character.
Come on, Peter. Don't you like my new hoodie? I struck the killing blow off my mask. And now I'm going dope with my drip hood.
Okay. You have the actors for the Andrew Garfield villains back. You got Jamie Foxx as a slightly new version of Electro. And what's his name as the lizard man?
Poor Peter Parker.
At least, I think it's the same actor. You got Thomas Hayden Church back as the Sandman, I think. So, of course, put one and one together. Say it with me, everybody. Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield are back as their respective Spider-Men. And you know what makes this crossover work so tremendously well? It's not just added in just to appease to fans. It also works to serve the story and the character growth. There is a scene where Peter is grieving the death of Aunt May. He's accompanied by MJ and Best Buddy Boy, and then later accompanied by the previous Spider-Men. And they share their losses too, and they help Peter Parker get back on his feet to stop crime and save the day. This scene could have easily have felt like it was pandering, like some of the other MCU stuff as of late. But this crossover works, and actually enhances the emotions of the scene, especially if you're familiar with the previous Spider-Man. Because all these Spider-Man have experienced loss at some point. That's what brings them together at this crucial scene. Honestly, it's probably one of the best scenes I've seen in a while. Tom Holland lost Aunt May, and it was all his fault. And he has to face up with the consequences. Tobey Maguire had a similar experience. His Uncle Ben was killed, and it was all his fault. And if you've seen the movies, you know he's exactly right. It was Tobey Maguire's fault that Uncle Ben died. No offense meant Tobey Maguire. And Andrew Garfield lost his poor girlfriend Gwen Stacy, and it was kind of his fault. I scratch that. Yeah, I think it was his fault because he got her more and more involved because he was so romantically involved with her. But he promised her dad, Diego from Ice Age, that he should keep away from Gwen Stacy to keep her safe, and he didn't, and he had to face the consequences. And hey, Andrew Garfield didn't do as well as the other Spider-Men, so he's given a second chance here. Andrew Garfield, I must admit, I actually liked your movies. But either way, he's been fully redeemed here. That's another thing I really like about this movie, redemption. And this idea that good things can come from evil events. There's some fantastic callbacks to previous Spider-Man movies. I was even on the edge of my seat at one point when there was a direct mention to the second Andrew Garfield movie. You know the one. That, and we get the added bonus of the pure entertainment of all the Peter Parkers getting emotional together, doing science together, fighting villains together. And they even managed to cure all the villains. Now, whether or not that makes an impact in their respectable universes where most of them die anyway, God only knows. But in order to save the day, the Tom Holland Spider-Man had to wipe away everyone's memories for good. Meaning, he now lives a more peaceful yet isolating life. You can tell he finally lived up to his sense of responsibility to make necessary sacrifices to protect his loved ones. And you could tell in this movie that the chemistry between MJ and the Tom Holland Spider-Man is quite genuine. And I've got to give a shout out to my cousin Peter, and yeah, he's also called Peter, and my other cousin Rebecca, for encouraging me to watch the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. At least I saw the first two with my cousin Peter. Yeah, I've never seen the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies until this year. And as of recording this, I've still yet to watch the whole of the third one. But hey, I watched 1 and 2, that counts. So thank you, Cousin Peter, for encouraging me to watch the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, at least the first two, because that added so much emotion and context to the villains as well as Tobey Maguire. Okay, now that I've summarized the story, I might as well talk about the geeky stuff now. All the little cameos and hints, like, right at the start of the movie, was that the Daredevil from the Netflix show? He only has a small cameo role yet. It's just brilliant the way he talks in needing a good lawyer and then stopping a brick being thrown out a window right before Peter has the chance to catch it for him. I think this kind of cameo would work even if people had no idea who this guy was, because him catching the brick also works as a bit of a side gag. I gotta watch that Netflix show now. There was also a cameo of from another Tom, Tom Hardy, who portrays Eddie, of course, accompanied by the Venom parasite. As it turns out, he's also from another universe, so he has this awkward post-credit scene where he's drinking at a pub, but he's sent back to his own universe just before he can pay the bill. He's quite drunk, and a little bit of the symbiote manages to escape to Tom Holland's universe. So hey, you Venom fans out there, you get excited, I guess. And it's so good to see the other Spider-Men and the other villains again. It's so good to see that Tobey Maguire and his respective villains haven't lost their touch after 20 years. And it's good to see Andrew Garfield and his villains get a second chance on screen. I mean, it's clear that all of them have aged, yet they haven't lost their touch. Tobey Maguire, despite clearly being this middle-aged man, 30 or so, he's still the lovable dork that we've loved him as. Andrew Garfield is still the cool dude, with a lot more sympathy for him this time. Now I'm just thinking, I wonder what's gonna be a more competitive multiverse movie, this or Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I was just expecting like Miles Morales and that Spider-Man from there to, or maybe even, now that I think about it, Spider-Gwen to be coming in. Oh my days, that would cause quite a reaction for Andrew Garfield. Okay, enough about the geeky stuff. How do I rate this movie? My opinion might change, but I think I'm willing to give this movie a 10 out of 12 because this movie worked so well to give actual consequences for the Tom Holland Spider-Man movie, a loving reprise for the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, and redemption and sympathy for the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man. Something else I forgot to mention. I mean, it's no secret that Spider-Man is often very self-aware, and yet all the things that that people like me often talk about, they talk about it here. They mention the fact that the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man doesn't need to make artificial web slingers. He just does the web slinger out of his arms. And even mentions the reason why he had web block was because of an existential crisis he had. Yeah, believe me, existential crises are not fun. But they are essential to grow. The way they work off each other in the science lab, they know their stuff. They're all brilliant. Honestly, I could go on, but to make a long story short, I think this is the best Phase 4 MCU thing so far. The television shows were fun, but they weren't what you'd call perfect. Well, that said, I've yet to watch the Hawkeye show. I think it goes to show that a movie like this could have so easily have gone to the more corporate side of things. Like all the previous MCU movies, especially in Phase 4, have gone through. It could have easily have made the same light-hearted mistakes that the previous Tom Holland movie made of not living up to consequences. But this movie doesn't seem to have any of those weaknesses. It doesn't feel like it's corporately manipulating you like The Rise of Skywalker or something. It doesn't feel bland or boring or that the MCU is beginning to lose its touch like with Shanghai and the Eternals. This just feels like a genuine good movie. And you know what? As long as we keep having movies like that, I'd say we're in good hands. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoy the drawing that I made in the left side of the screen. Yeah, I'm clearly going to edit this in later on. But I'm not the only one who seems to show favor towards this movie. Check out my good friend Brooks Gallinghouse, aka the Squid Jetta Squid Bear Monster Person Rar. Check out his review for this movie, which I helped to edit, by the way. Nothing much else to say, but Scott's Myers signing out.